Alastair Newton joining us to talk about the big event that is all set to take place this evening, and to talk about the impact of that, especially when you talk about the world order. Thank you so much, Alastair. Thank you so much for joining us on ET Now to talk about the big event that is the Trump taking oath as president of the United States once again. And this time, the entire scenario is different when you compare it to the Trump regime 1.0. The rhetoric definitely is similar.
Yes, except it's much more forceful, much clearer, and much more determined to crack on with a very rapid rollout of the MAGA agenda. And I think we should be in no doubt whatsoever that President Trump, as he will be in a few hours' time, is determined to make the most of the next 2 years, knowing very well that, things happen in midterm elections, and effectively, as a journal which I won't mention by name because I'd be advertising, headlined today in one of its articles, this is actually the beginning of the end of the Trump era, assuming that he doesn't manage to finagle some way to serve for a third term, which he says he's not going to do. So effectively, we start the countdown today, and Donald Trump will be in a hurry to impose his agenda on America. And let's be clear about this, to secure his legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Alastair, hi, good to have you on the show. You know, I think everyone's waiting with bated breath as to what the rhetoric on China is going to be, and whether or not trade war with China, do we see that panning out under Trump? You think tensions will abate or escalate?
Well, of course, a lot of people see Trump as being the quintessential deal maker, and there is no question other than he likes doing deals. However, if we look at his history dating back 40 years, he has long been very, very negative indeed about America's trade deficit. He has long advocated tariffs as a means of addressing the deficit, and more recently has cited tariffs as the means to address what he sees as a lot of additional ills: illegal immigration, the issue with drugs in America, and so on and so forth. So I do think that of all the uncertainties that surround Donald Trump, the one thing on which he has been extraordinarily consistent is tariffication of imports into the US. Now, I'm not suggesting that we have to take him literally at his words, i.e. 60% tariffs on China, since you cited China, 10 to 20% on all other imports. But I do think we should expect some fairly rapid moves on tariffs, because contrary to what a lot of the commentariat are expecting, I think what we are likely to see from Donald Trump is tariffs first, talk later, rather than using the threat of tariffs to bring people to the table. Impose the tariffs first, ratchet them back in return for concessions. And China clearly is going to be his top target. Now, whether Elon Musk, who clearly has a big vested interest in good relations with China, given that over half of Tesla motor cars are manufactured there, whether Elon Musk can get some softening of Trump's stance remains to be seen. Let's keep in mind that Musk has basically to push back against the whole of the rest of the Trump administration if we're going to see anything other than real hawkishness on China going forward.
Right. That's one key criteria, or an event that you need to watch out for, key development that you need to watch out for, the role that Elon Musk also will play if it is in softening Trump's stance when you talk about China. But I wanted to understand, given your experience in this geopolitical risk analysis, what are the primary concerns or flashpoints that investors or businesses should keep in mind when they are actually trying to analyze or gauge the entire Trump 2.0 administration?
Well, obviously, I think tariffs is the biggest single grey rhino out there. And I do think that Wall Street is being remarkably blasé about the tariff threats, especially bearing in mind two factors which markets do not seem to be taking into account. First of all, assuming that Trump does go ahead with some tariffication of imports from China, and why wouldn't he? After all, Biden did nothing to roll back the Trump 2018 tariffs. China will retaliate. There is no question about that whatsoever. We've already seen China moving on strategic minerals in response to more tech embargoes imposed by the Biden administration in the last few weeks of its term in office. So China will retaliate. I don't think markets are taking account of that. And I also don't think markets are taking sufficient account of the likely widening of trade wars as China looks to continue its export-led growth model by looking for markets to substitute, not only for the United States, but also increasingly for the European Union. And if we look at emerging markets, including, I might say, India, you're seeing the rollout of more and more defensive trade measures against alleged unfair imports from China. So I think markets need to wake up to the fact that we are looking at something which is much, much bigger potentially than just in inverted commas, Donald Trump imposing a few tariffs on imports from third countries, most notably China. Secondly, I think we do need to look out for moves on immigration. I think probably we're perhaps a little bit too concerned about that. I think we're going to see a lot of noise, but I do think it's going to be very difficult for Donald Trump to arrange mass deportations. And I do think that he is going to succumb to pressure from the tech sector titans in particular over H-1B visas, which of course is an issue of particular interest to you guys in India.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, Alastair, that I wanted to, talk about was Trump's impact on geopolitics, because he's been pretty vocal all through the past 2 days talking about how he's going to try and solve the Russia-Ukraine situation and completely evade a World War III.
Well, I think talk of World War III is actually a bit overstated. So let's put that to one side. On Russia-Ukraine, he has ratcheted back a bit from bringing peace on day one, which clearly was never going to happen. He's now talking about maybe 6 months or even longer. He almost certainly will succeed in getting the parties to the table. Getting a deal, in theory, would be quite easy if he was prepared basically to throw Ukraine under a bus. But the disadvantage of doing that would be that it would be perceived by the likes of China and Iran as being a sign of weakness on his behalf. North Korea too, let's not forget North Korea. Since Trump needs to be doing deals with China, is looking to do a deal with Iran of some sort after exerting maximum pressure on Iran. And we've already seen him playing a hand in the Middle East conflict. So clearly he is focused on that. He can't afford to be seen to surrender to whatever Vladimir Putin puts on the table in the first instance. So I do think Russia-Ukraine is going to take time. I do think Donald Trump deserves some credit for the Gaza deal, which we saw yesterday, beginning to roll out. Let's hope it holds for the sake of everybody in the region, not just the Palestinians in Gaza. And I certainly think we're going to see rising tensions with China. Where Trump stands on Taiwan, who knows? He's not said anything about that as yet. It is interesting, though, that according to reports, the Quad ambassadors are going to meet with Donald Trump over the course of the next couple of days. That's Japan, Australia and India, plus the US, the Quad. And that does seem to indicate that he's not simply going to abandon allies over key geopolitical issues as seen from the White House.
Right, so there's lots for us to watch out for. Alastair, thank you so much for joining us in ET Now to give us your take on what the Trump 2.0 administration could be likely or look like. And yes, definitely Trump or rather tariffs is something that we all need to watch out for very closely.